Some friends asked me to make a video about how the vector mount works, what are the parts, how it's assembled, etc. So here goes. This is the main part of a vector mount. I call it the body of the Endpin. And we have it in 3 different sizes of central bore. The profile looks the same on all of them, and they're all interchangeable between cello and double bass. The only difference is what installation cone you put on it, and then you cut the cone to size to fit the various instruments and sizes of instruments, so you don't need to ream out the end block of the instrument. So the next part is the key part, the namesake vector clamp, and it's a little wedge, so it goes into this hole, and then when you put the thumb screw in, it tightens in the hole and makes a little wedge that wedges the end pin in place. Now, I've shown you here, we have different materials of vector clamps. The typical one that we include with an end pin is just black aircraft aluminum. There also is a stainless steel one, which I call the off-road clamp for bass players who are going to put wheels in them, or using an angled rod pin, something that's going to put a lot of stress on it. Then we recommend what I call the off-road clamp slug. So, and as far as thumb screws, we also make them with different materials. It's the sound of the different thumb screws doesn't change the sound of the end pin. It's purely an aesthetic choice with brass or polished titanium, which is what this is, or just a black aircraft aluminum. Now, when you're assembling, you can see this comes out. Of course, when you get your end pin, it's going to be glued into place. We just mix a little bit of 5-minute epoxy, work a few drops into the bottom part of the thread, screw it into place so that 22.5 millimeters approximately are extending out. It's about 5 threads or something like that. And again, that's just so that it doesn't aesthetically stick out the other end. There would be nothing wrong if it did stick out the other end. In fact, it would grip more of the threads, but it's nicer not to have that happen. So it's about 22.5 millimeters there. Now, should you ever want to change the thumb screw, or should you ever be damaging, these things are designed to last many, many, many years. But if you're a bass player and you've been pounding over curves and the threads get a little mucked up, so it's not quite as smooth as you want, then you can put the thumb screw assembly in an oven for about 15 minutes on 375 or so, and it heats up and it melts the glue. Then you can pick up, using a pliers or a vice grip, pick up the hot thumb screw. Don't hold it with your fingers, they'll get burnt, and then take a hot dish pad or cloth and unscrew this. You can screw it off and then just get another rod, either a rod itself, or you can cut off a 35 millimeter segment from any standard M4 threaded metric screw and use this and screw it in, and you've got a brand new thumb screw. And so these will last, again, a lifetime and more. So there's that. Now, to actually assemble it, when you do glue, when the part is glued, you'll get this all assembled. But if you should ever want to take one apart, when the parts are glued, you'll want to use this little brass washer. Again, it's not essential, but it makes things work more smoothly and nicely. And then you'll put a little bit of silicone grease. You'll work grease into the last few threads of the threaded rod. Work it in so it doesn't come squishing out. And then you'll be ready to tighten down the clamp. But one other thing to consider is there's tremendous force on these things because it's a wedge. It uses the vector principle, so it actually wedges in with very little thumb screw pressure. You'll see it tightens very easily and holds very tightly, but it pushes the clamp, the clamping slug against the back of this channel. So it's important to take a little bit of lubricant and lubricate the back side, this side of the channel for the clamping slug. If you don't do that, if ever, it's very, very rare, but in certain humidities, a certain temperature, a certain humidity, and you might find that when you tighten the thumb screw and then you loosen it, the clamping slug stays in place and you have to pop it out by pushing in. So if that happens, it just means you need to take out the clamping slug, put a little tiny bit of lubricant there on the side away from the end pin, and then it'll work very smoothly. Again, it affects the feel a little bit. So then once you've gotten this in place and assembled, you know, you can see this wasn't actually glued. It'll work even if you don't glue it. It's just, it works better if you glue it. And the other thing that can happen, if the glue joint if it's not glued correctly, sometimes the thumb screw itself will screw in and out instead of the clamp, and that's not ideal. But so I'm just faking this for the purpose of the video so we don't have to get messy glue out. But then once you get that out, you put the thumb screw in. You can see it's nice and it's very firm. You don't have to tighten it hard, but it makes a very, very firm contact and won't slip without the need for indexing. Now, when you're cutting the cone, there are these little spacers that you push into the gap that makes it very much easier to get it on and off. And if you don't use them, you'll find it's really hard because I make these cones pretty tight. And so then you pop them out, you pop these out. So if you're sizing the cone, you can watch another video about the actual cone installation. But basically, you just push it into the end block, you trace it with a pencil, you pull it out, you cut it, and then you measure the depth of the end block and you cut another spot over here. So you've got just the right length of cone, you push it on, you install it, and you're good to go. There is one other step that you'll want to know about if you want to use angled end pins. I realize this is a 10mm rod. This is a 1/2 inch, so I don't have quite the right adapter rod here. But basically, one of the unique features of these end pins is that because there's a flat segment in there that pushes against the rod, if you file a little flat spot on your end pin rod, then you can push this button and you can feel it when it pops into place. And then when you tighten it, there's no way the end pin rod can twist, which makes it great for people that want to bend an end pin. If you use a regular, most end pins made today have a bushing, it's round, and if you bend an end pin, bend a rod, it'll hold a little bit, but then it's going to twist in the socket here. This, or a base wheel, will sometimes twist. That's another thing that people encounter. Most base wheels are made with a flat spot, so you push the button in, click it into place, then tighten it, and you'll have an angle, a little flat spot that will prevent the rod from twisting. Then you can use something like one of these little angle adapters. This is a rod pin for cello, and you can get a huge variety of angles by making this articulation longer or shorter and changing which of the 3 settings you have it in the other part of the rod. So we have these for bass and cello. And oh, I forgot one key step. When we assemble these, when we push the bushing, this anti-vibration bushing into place, because of the pressure, it's going to compress, it's going to be a little small, and an end pin won't fit through. It's not going to fit through the anti-vibration bushing. So with each end pin, we take one of these little adjustable reamers. They're really wonderful tools. You can vary the space by just, thousandths of an inch or less, by just varying these bolts. The blades go up and down on a slanted channel. They get closer or farther. Then you just push it in by hand and take a few turns, and you make the hole here exactly what you want. This is important because if you've ever gotten an end pin, sometimes you might order a 1/2 inch end pin rod and have a 1/2 inch end pin mount and stick it in, and it doesn't fit because the manufacturer made the 1/2 inch end pin rod a little oversized. That happens a lot for some reason with 1/2 inch end pin rods. So then with our end pins, you can actually just ream it out a tiny bit and not worry that you're making it unusable for smaller end pins, because these are easy to replace. To replace them, you put a large drill bit into a vise and just by hand turn it down and cut out most of the plastic to the point that you can just bend a little lip, catch a little lip, and pull it out with the pliers. Then you can just press in another one. So these are very easy to replace or change should it become necessary. And when you're gluing, Q-tips are important if you're going to do any gluing. Well, they're great for lubricating, as I showed you, but if you're going to do any gluing of a rod or an end pin tip, These are great. You break off the tip so the cotton doesn't get in. You mix up a little 5-minute epoxy, stir it up on a piece of paper, and then you can use this to apply the glue quite easily and neatly, and then use the other side, the cotton, to wipe off any extra that oozes out with an end pin tip or with a glued thumb screw or such. So I think I've covered everything there, how it all works. If you have any questions, please contact us.